Welcome to the 6th episode of the Racing Report. I am your host, Rob Peeters, for this fabulous little half hour where we talk all things auto racing. And on today's show, we're going to be discussing the Mexico City Grand Prix as well as the F1 points battle, or lack thereof, I guess you could say. And we're also going to take a look at the NASCAR Championship battle, as we've only got one more race before we determine who's going to be in the championship at Phoenix in 2 weeks. And that's for both all the Cup, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. So a lot of stuff to talk about. And then we've got the Gold Coast 500 was also this weekend in the Supercars. Penultimate round of the season. They're only going to have one more round coming up here next month. So we'll talk about all of that. But first, I want to remind everybody here that if you're a frequent watcher, or if you're new, if this is your first time watching, welcome. My name is Rob Peeters, as I already mentioned. You can follow me on social media at rpeters33. It should be right down below here in that neat little a lower third. You can follow me on social media there. That helps me know that you appreciate and you want to watch this show. You want to support this show. That really means a lot to me. So anyway, without further ado, before I get all into this crazy, self-promotion nonsense, let's go ahead and talk about racing, because that's what we're here today. So let's discuss Formula One. So in the world of Formula One, if you watched the Mexico City Grand Prix this past weekend, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show, so stay tuned, don't miss that. But it was not a good race for the hometown hero of Sergio Perez. He did not have a good race at all. And apparently, according to Christian Horner, Sergio Perez could be dropped entirely before the end of the season after a quote-unquote disastrous Mexico City Grand Prix. That's Christian Horner. He's been saying that seemingly for all season now, and Checo is still finishing the season. My opinion, you want my opinion? I don't understand what good it does to sack a guy with only 4 or 5 races left in the season. There's literally no good comes from that. Like, really, I don't understand that kind of logic. But maybe it's him trying to light a fire under his pants. I have no idea. But either way, it's not a good look when the team principal is completely losing faith in the car's second driver, especially after Max Verstappen hasn't won in 10 races, by the way. So it's been a while. But And then we've got some new Formula One news coming in. Apparently, Honda was fined $600,000 and Alpine was fined $400,000 for breaching power unit cost cap regulations. So they overspent, and now they're being fined. Logical. But that's it for Formula One news. Let's move on into the world of IndyCar today, because there is some big IndyCar news that was just announced earlier today, and that is that, or earlier Wednesday, I should say, and that is that Chip Ganassi Racing has announced its lineup for next year. So we already talked about this, I think, in one of our first episodes when the IndyCar charter agreement was pushed through. Not really pushed through. It wasn't like NASCAR charter agreement. It was more or less approved. But when the IndyCar charter agreement passed, there was a stipulation that, hey, we're only going to have 3 charters available for each team. And so Chip Ganassi Racing made the decision to downsize. They had been running 5 full-time cars, and now they're only going to be running 3 full-time cars. And we know who the drivers are. So it was already it was never in doubt that Scott Dixon and Alex Palou were going to keep their seats, and they have. But we also know that Kyffin Simpson is also keeping his seat, and he's going to be moving to the number 8 car. So the 4 and the 11 car from last year were shut down by Chip Ganassi Racing. And so they're moving Kyffin into the number 8. Nobody knows where Linus Lundqvist is going, because remember, Marcus Armstrong is going to Meyer Shank. He's going to take over the 66, teammates with Felix Rosenqvist. But we do not know at this current moment where Linus Lundqvist is going to land. And that, I think a lot of people, if you had told them that at the end of 23, that this was going to be the situation going into 25, I don't think they would have believed you. But that's what's happening. So some crazy news there in the world of IndyCar. And now let's move into the world of Supercars, because we talked about last week, Mark Winterbottom was probably going to be pressing pause on his Supercars career. Well, guess what? He's not pressing pause after all. He is still, however, going to go into a co-driver role, but at least he gets to compete next year in Supercars in some form. So he's going to join Tickford Racing next year as a co-driver with Cam Waters. So he's going to return to Ford. So first of all, that's huge because he's been with Chevrolet with Team 18 for a while now. But Winterbottom's been, for a long time, he was a Ford driver. He was always a Ford driver. I always remember him in the Pepsi Max Ford growing up, watching him. So he's coming back to a Ford team in Tickford Racing, which is, I guess, also technically the same team. But some cool news there, especially after the news, because I think a lot of people, including myself, really love Frosty. We call him Frosty because Winterbottom, winter. That's why we call him that. He's a cool dude. Very, very nice guy. Very, very humble person. Very good driver as well. So good to see him still be able to kind of control when he goes out. Now moving on into the world of NASCAR. This was really interesting over the weekend. NASCAR has conducted a wet weather tire test at Homestead-Miami Speedway. So they were racing at Homestead over the weekend. But now they've conducted a wet weather tire test there at Homestead. And I guess, this is at least my theory, is I don't think that they'd ever race on a 1.5 mile track in wet weather tires. I don't think that that's going to happen. But what they would probably do is see if they could run pace laps around and have it not damage anything or have it not, mess up anything in the cars. I think that's probably what they're looking at here, because as I think NASCAR said it many times, Steve Phelps has said it many times, the number one thing that's going to help these cars dry the track is getting the cars on the track. The number one thing that's going to dry the track is getting the cars on track. The Air Titans and jet dryers can only do so much, but it's really going to dry out if you can actually get some rubber going down and the cars driving over the track. So I think that's what you're probably going to see, where they would run caution laps. They would come down, probably put on rain tires and run caution laps around the track until it maybe got in kind of like a green-yellow situation. I would think that would be how they would do it, but that's yet to be determined. That's just my initial hypothesis. Take it with a grain of salt by all means, but that is my hypothesis, at least in this. So we'll see where that goes. Definitely interesting because they have had some success with the wet weather tires on short tracks. Obviously, we've seen it work at Martinsville. We've seen it work at New Hampshire. So we know that it can work, and it can work well to dry the track. But those cars, once that track gets dried, those tires do not last. You need to put on slicks immediately. But that makes for an interesting race. So rain is always makes for interesting races. So if we could get more NASCAR races during the raining conditions and make them safe, I'm all for that, especially when it comes to the entertainment value. Next piece of news here in the world of NASCAR is a pretty big one. If you watched the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race over the weekend, which I don't blame you if you missed, it was on at noon on FS1. I imagine you were probably watching, unless you were originally seeking this out, there was probably some college football game, especially if you were the world of Indiana. We really wanted to see if Indiana was going to go 8-0. They did. But this is a racing show. But the truck race happened, and in the truck race, we had an incident where Connor Jones took out his frustrations and just completely wrecked Matt Mills. Now, it didn't seem at first like it was that big of an accident, it was obviously intentional, but it wasn't, at least to me, a huge, thing where it was like he went down there and he Ron Hornaday him like Kyle Busch did, or Kyle Busch him, like Ron Hornaday did back to Ron Hornaday back in 2011. Remember that when he got suspended for the whole, he got parked for the whole weekend. Yeah, a lot of people probably remember that. Probably not well, but it wasn't like that, but it was pretty heinous still in and of itself. And really what was bad was the car caught fire when it hit the wall. Matt Mills' car caught fire. And when Matt Mills got out, they took him to the hospital and they kept him there overnight because of the smoke inhalation. So he technically sent a driver to a hospital by wrecking him, which, yeah, not good. Not exactly good. So naturally, NASCAR has issued their own retaliation, their own punishment for Connor Jones. He is parked for this weekend at Martinsville. He's suspended. He's not going to be racing this weekend, and probably rightfully so. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the show and then after we come back from break, but it was not a good look. It was definitely not a good look. Yeah, just can't let your temper get to you like that. Next piece of news here. Justin Allgaier and Brandt have re-signed a 2-year contract extension with Junior Motorsports to remain in the car for at least the next 2 seasons. So that's good news there to see. Justin Allgaier, good Xfinity lifer, going out there. He has a chance to race for a championship. We'll talk about it later, again, when we come back from break coming up here. But Justin Allgaier could be, after a disastrous start to the playoffs, he could still be looking at an opportunity to run for a championship in 2 weeks. So we'll talk about that. And then finally here, in the last piece of NASCAR news is kind of a bummer one, but Brett Holmes Racing announced this last week that it is shuttering its Truck Series operations. Just completely. Brett Holmes, if you know Brett Holmes, popular guy in the ARCA series, kind of someone who's always done it himself, but an owner-driver, really, in the lower divisions of NASCAR and in ARCA. He's shuttering the team. But the team is not technically going anywhere because Chris Hettinger, a late model car owner, has purchased the assets and now will enter the final 2 truck races with a number 4 car driven by Brett Moffitt. So some interesting news there. Take that as what you will. Some sad news, but some, I guess, interesting. At the Morgan McClure number 4 font is back, but at cost, we lost the classic Braun Turner Scott number 32 font, which I'm also sad about, but I'm happy to see the Morgan McClure font come back. Teach their own. Anyway, we have to take a break here real quick, get in some advertisers, but we will be right back after these messages. And when we come back, we will talk about the NASCAR weekend in Homestead, the Xfinity, the whole NASCAR weekend in Homestead, the F1 weekend at the Mexico City Grand Prix, and the Gold Coast 500 down under for Supercars. So don't go anywhere. You're watching The Racing Report with Rob Peeters. Welcome back to The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. We're going to talk about now the NASCAR weekend in Homestead. We're going to start off with the Cup Series. The Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick wins that race. Now he's going to be racing for a championship in 2 weeks' time. And Michael Jordan has a very legitimate possibility to win a NASCAR championship, which would just be out of this world. If you had told someone this, that Michael Jordan would have an opportunity to win a NASCAR championship 5 years ago, they would not have believed you. Maybe they would have, but it still would have been kind of far-fetched because everybody knew that Michael Jordan was always interested. Michael Jordan's always been a NASCAR fan, very open about being a NASCAR fan. So I guess it's not super surprising that he would start a team, but for that team that he started to be a championship contending team, yeah, this quick out of the gate. Yeah, I mean, because remember, this team started in 2021 as a 1-car effort with Bubba Wallace, and now they've got a 2-car effort, possibly even maybe expanding to a 3-car effort next year. This is huge. I mean, that's just absolutely huge if you're this team. But really, with Tyler Reddick, this strategy call by Billy Scott as crew chief was mind-blowing to me at first because he just let him stay out. He didn't really play any strategy. He just let him go, let him run the car out of gas, let him run the tires down, and then called him in. And it just so with like around 10 to go, and it just so happened that he got the luckiest break in the world when Kyle Larson spun trying to pass Martin Truex, who was a lap down at the time, for the lead. That move, I think, cost Kyle Larson the championship, or a shot at the championship. I think he genuinely had one, but I think unless he wins at Martinsville, it's going to be very, very, very tough for him to get there. And actually, let's take a look. I'm going to take a look here now at the playoffs. And right now, Kyle Larson is 7 points below the cut line. And I am not super confident that he can break free at Martinsville and get above that cut line. Why? Because he's battling his teammate William Byron. And Byron has traditionally, if you look at the stats, if you look at statistically, William Byron has been better at Martinsville compared to Kyle Larson. Christopher Bell as well. Remember who won the Hail Melon race? Christopher Bell. So that's why I'm saying I'm not sure. I'm not confident of Kyle Larson's championship prospects at this point. And I really think that late race spit is going to cost him substantially because you can't be making that kind of a mistake when you're racing for a championship like this. But that really goes to show all of Larson's season, where he's been either really good or really mistake prone. And yes, he's won 6 races. Yes, that's a huge accomplishment in and of itself. Yes, he should probably be racing for a championship. But also look at the DNFs and look at the poor finishes that he's put together the last couple of weeks. And even then, you look at his teammate Chase Elliott, who is way below the cut line. He's 43 points below the cut line. He is dead last. He's 8th. So he has to win at this point in order to get in. He has to win. He has no other option. He has to win in order to make it to the championship 4. And he's been the most consistent driver. He has the best average finish of anybody in the Cup Series to this year. It shows you how everything can change. Everything can change in an instant with this playoff format. But really, a lot of it was because of this win by Tyler Reddick. Reddick was not solidly in. I mean, he was hovering around the cut line after Las Vegas, especially after his flip at Las Vegas. But now he's right in the forefront. And I would be curious to see how it goes for him at Phoenix, because we're going to we know that Reddick and Logano are going to be in the championship 4 at Phoenix, but I think Bell and Byron are probably going to be the 2 most likely guys that are going to also race for a championship, because they're also above the cut line. And if you look at Larson, Hamlin, Blaney, and Elliott, I mean, Blaney did win Martinsville last year, and that got him into the championship 4, and he ended up winning the title that way. But can he do it 2 years in a row? Maybe. I don't know. I've never seen him as a Martinsville guy. Chase Elliott, I see as a Martinsville guy. Denny Hamlin, I see as a Martinsville guy. Kyle Larson, not so much. Maybe you disagree. I don't know. Let me know. But anyway, that's the Cup Series weekend in Homestead. Definitely sets up for a very interesting race this weekend at Martinsville, as does the Xfinity Series, because Austin Hill won on a track that's not a super speedway. He won at Homestead, and now, as a result, he's going to also race for a championship. So now what's kind of crazy to me is that we have Austin Hill, we have AJ Allmendinger racing for a championship, but also Cole Custer and maybe Justin Allgaier. Allgaier is 35 points to the good. Custer is 28 points to the good. I like those chances a lot more, especially since Chandler Smith is 28 points out. And then you have Jesse Love. He's sitting at 35 points out. Sam Mayer, 47. And finally, Sammy Smith is all the way back in 95 points out in last. So I don't think Sammy Smith, unless he comes out with a miracle, I don't think that's going to happen. Sam Mayer has been known to hit bottom 9th home run grand slams to get into the next round of playoffs. He might be the guy to watch. But Chandler Smith has apparently said that he doesn't have a ride for next year. Interesting. But if it's true, I think he has a lot more to race for coming up here this weekend at Martinsville. So definitely it'll be a great race to watch here at the Xfinity Series at Martinsville. See who's going to go to the championship 4. And then also the Truck Series. The Truck Series might even be the more interesting one, because we only have one guy locked in. Grant Enfinger won at Homestead and of course, you had the Connor Jones, Matt Mills thing. That'll happen. So I guess Johnny Sauter is going to take over for him, according to Bob Pockrass. He tweeted that out on Wednesday. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, we're looking at a situation where Corey Heim, Christian Eckes, and Ty Majeski are all pretty solidly locked in. Looks like the lowest. Ty Majeski is 22 points ahead of Raja Carruth. So unless Carruth goes out there and wins at Martinsville, I don't think that he's going to make it very far. Ty Majeski is a short track guy. I would peg him probably as the guy to win at Martinsville. I don't know. Again, I don't bet. I don't do any of that. But hey, man, I would not inherently balk if the odds for Ty Majeski winning were good. Just saying. Moving on here into the Formula One world. Now let's talk about the Formula One Mexico City Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz gets Ferrari back-to-back wins. So Leclerc won last week at the U.S. Grand Prix, and now Sainz wins at the Mexico City Grand Prix. And of course, Pato O'Ward got to participate in Free Practice 1. That was huge, and if you saw social media, people were all over Pato. I mean, like literally all over him. I mean, that dude looked like a celebrity. And now we find out he's going to go run Formula E, a demonstration with Formula E, and I guess IndyCar as well when the Formula E series comes to the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in January. So Pato is really killing it. But outside of that, and I guess you got to look at the positives if you're a Mexican fan, because look at what happened to Checo. I mean, the dude got flipped off by Liam Lawson, which admittedly is not a good look for Liam, because it's his like second race in Formula One, and he's already flipping off a race-winning veteran. You know, it's not a good look. You don't really want to do that, especially when that's technically your teammate. I mean, he's in the RB or the Toro Rosso or whatever, and Checo's in the Red Bull. I don't really recommend flipping someone off, especially if there's rumors linking you to his car seat next year. Throwing that out there. And then finally, the fourth race of the week was the Supercars Gold Coast 500. Not really much changed in the championship battle. It looks like Will Brown is probably going to lock up the championship at Adelaide next month. Not really surprised about that at all. And when I say next month, I'm recording this on October, so if you're watching this in November, it's in November. But in race one, Cam Waters won the first race of the 250-kilometer race, and then Brody Kostecki won the second 250-kilometer race, so that makes up the full 500 kilometers of the Gold Coast 500. And that is it. That, like I said, Will Brown has a chance to lock up the championship in Supercars in the next round. He probably will do it. I'd be surprised if he hasn't already done it. But definitely Still some reasons to watch. I think the Adelaide 500 will still be a very, very fun race, especially given Brody Kostecki's back in victory lane, back in winning formation, and I think that's very huge, especially when he's getting ready to go to Dick Johnson Racing next year. I think that's going to be a very big get for them, very huge for him in general and his career, and I'll be curious to see how that goes. So anyway, we have to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we will preview everything that's coming up this weekend and beyond in the world of auto racing. Don't go anywhere. You're watching The Racing Report. Welcome back to The Racing Report with Rob Peeters. Now we're going to take a look at what's coming up in the weekend ahead. The NASCAR is going to Martinsville. I would recommend the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series race. If you absolutely can watch those, I would highly recommend trying to get those watched, because I don't know how good the next-gen car is going to be at Martinsville. But, again, championship implications. We've got guys that are trying to get into the championship for someone like Kyle Larson. I don't think, obviously, you're not going to see a Hail Melon or anything, something like that. But you could see some pretty drastic things going on with some of the pit strategy as well, given the fact that I think track position is going to be the biggest key to winning at Martinsville. I mean, that's really what it is. That's what most short track races are, unless there's massive tire wear. I think you just it's track position, track position, track position. You have to make the right move strategy-wise in order to move up, because it's not necessarily going to be super easy to make up those positions on track. It's going to be a lot easier to make those positions in pit lane. And when it comes to that, you got to be fast. You got to make sure your pit crews are fast, and you got to make sure that your drivers aren't making any mistakes on pit road. And that's what it's going to come down to. You know, if someone like Larson speeds, or even if someone like Bell or Byron speeds, I mean, that could be the entire difference of a championship flipping in favor of one person to the other. You really have to be careful with that. Whereas the Xfinity Series, the truck race, I think you're going to see a lot more rubbing and racing. You know, you're going to see a lot more of that, a lot more beating and banging like a traditional Martinsville race, and just, you know, we'll see how calm it gets, because again, these Martinsville races for truck and Xfinity Series the last couple of years have not exactly been without controversy. I mean, drivers have gotten real mad. I mean, remember Sheldon Creed last year? I don't even want to remember it. Just a very odd moment. And then the year prior to that, with Ty Gibbs wrecking his teammate Brandon Jones, despite already being in the championship four and taking away an opportunity to be in the championship four from his teammate, which still also breaks me up. Either way, definitely it's going to be a must-watch. And then the Formula One Brazilian Grand Prix, I always love the Interlagos circuit. I always think it's one of the better circuits on the Formula One calendar. Much better than the Tilkedromes, right? But no, I actually think this is going to be a really fun race. Now, the championship, though, again, unless this is my theory, and this is going to sound wrong, but if you think about it, Ayrton Senna's done it, Michael Schumacher's done it. I say if Lando Norris is tired of Max Verstappen running him wide, he just lets Max run into him. Worst case scenario, takes them both out of the race. Best case scenario, it takes Max out of the race and not Lando, and he still scores a point or two or three or however many. You know, that at this point, if he's going to be that tired of it and Max is going to keep pushing it, and the FIA is not going to put a rule in that says, hey, you can't push your competitor wide in order to pass them, that's what's going to have to happen. Anyway, and then the Supercars Adelaide 500 is coming up. That's going to be the season finale of Supercars. That's going to be on November 16th through 17th. And then Super Formula goes to Suzuka November 8th through 10th. And then we've got Formula E. We'll talk about Formula E coming up here in a couple of weeks when we finish up, we wrap up NASCAR, we wrap up Formula One, we wrap up Supercars. We start moving into 2025. We start looking ahead to 2025. So be sure to tune in every week to the Racing Report. We can be found on all across Tegna affiliates, on YouTube, and on your favorite Tegna platform. Go ahead. Watch us. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this week. We hope you enjoyed it, and we really hope that you enjoy this weekend's races so that we can come back next week and we'll talk all about them. So my name is Rob Peeters, and you've been watching the Racing Report. We'll see you next week.